Hello and welcome back to What If Ash Was Like Paul. Now it's time to begin the Hoenn segment of this story. So right after his victory in Johto, Ash would return home to Kanto, where him and Professor Oak would talk about his victory. Ash would decide to start fresh with early Venusaur and would leave all his Pokemon behind, and a decision that Oak would agree with. After that, he would receive 3 Pokeballs. Then Oak would tell him about his student in Hoenn called Professor Birch. As then Ash would say that he can't wait to meet him. Ash would then go home, as then he'd want to spend time with his mum, as his mum would notice that Ash is a lot less colder than when she last talked to him. As then she'd say that she's proud of him and how he's become a much nicer person and a much stronger trainer. As then Ash would thank his mom as he'd spend time with her, and then she'd decide to give him some new clothes, because she said that his clothes looked ripped, torn and old and dirty. They weren't anything worthy of going to a whole new region, and she should have given these clothes when he was going to Johto. As then he'd get in his Hoenn get up, so he'd then go on a ferry to Hoenn. As then he'd be exploring the ferry, or the boat, I don't know. As then he would reach the port after a little bit, where he'd encounter a Sphere. He would throw a Pokeball at it, not quite knowing where it was. As then this episode would go the same, but without Pikachu having fever and no Team Rocket, and Ash doesn't have Pikachu and no Team Rocket. As then Ash would get a Pokedex that would identify Sphere. So then, in this episode, there were a bunch of mad Poochyena in a pack who were trying to attack everyone, I think. So Ash would use Sphere against the Poochyena, as she would then use a water gun. She would wet Poochyena, then Poochyena would charge in with a bite, which would do decent damage. Then Ash would call for an Icy Wind, as showing its inexperience in battle, it would charge through the Icy Wind, not caring that its speed would get lowered. As then its speed would get so lowered that Sphere would easily knock it down with an Ice Ball, which would then give Ash opportunity to catch it. As then this episode had happened with Team Magma trying to get something, but this time they would try to get it done faster, as they were scared of Ash knowing how strong he was, as he had won the Johto League. So the events of this episode where Ash battled the battles known in an exhibition match would go quite differently, because Ash in this timeline had 3 Pokemon. He didn't just have Pikachu. He did not just have Pikachu, yeah. As then Ash would decide to go on with the battle, as he would use Poochyena against Slakoth. Slakoth was going for a slash, as then Poochyena would quickly avoid the attack and would use a crunch, showing how much better it was doing under Ash's guidance. As then Slakoth would then go for another slash, which would quickly be dodged, as then Poochyena would use a bite, quickly realizing that brute force wouldn't do well. It would decide to wait and be patient and see what Poochyena would do and know the best counter for it, as it would stand there and wait. As then Poochyena would use a crunch, as it would then use a counter, which would send Poochyena back. So Poochyena, realizing the kind of opponent it was up against, would then use a Snarl, which would lower its special attack and distract its enemy for a long enough time for it to finish off with a bite. As then Norm would send out his Vigoroth. Vigoroth was quite overconfident and would pump its chest like a gorilla, trying to show some dominance, as then Poochyena, not being a gorilla or an ape, wouldn't really understand why Vigoroth did it, but it really wouldn't care, as it would then go for a crunch which would hit Vigoroth with a decent chunk of damage. So Vigoroth would quickly respond with a slash which would send back the tiny dog or wolf Pokemon. Hyena. It's a hyena, as it's called, Poochyena. Hyena, whatever. Yeah. So then, I shall call for Poochyena to use a powerful snarl, which would lower special attack of Vigoroth. As then, Vigoroth would then go for a powerful slash, which wouldn't hit. As then, Poochyena would attack the wide open Vigoroth with a crunch, but this was just what Norman and Vigoroth wanted, as then they would both use a counter. Norman and Vigoroth. I'm calling them both because they're fighting like very coordinated, as then would knock back Poochyena for a lot of damage. Poochyena would barely be standing, as would then go for a bite, which would cause Vigoroth to flinch, but in the end it would just be preventing the inevitable, slowing down the inevitable, as then Vigoroth would finish off Poochyena with a slash. So then Ash would send out his Feel. His Feel would then go for an Ice Ball, which would do some decent damage to Vigoroth, as then Vigoroth would go for a slash, which would quickly be avoided, as then Ash would use a Water Gun. Vigoroth would just stand there. Ash, realising what it was doing, would use an Icy Wind, which would slow it down, which would cause the counter to fail and finish it off with an Ice Ball. As then Ash would keep Phil in, wanting to see how strong his last Pokemon is, as then we would see Norman send out his infamous Slaking. Slaking would lie there, as then Phil would take advantage and would use an Ice Ball. Ice Ball would do some decent damage to Slaking, as then Slaking would get up and would use a Focus Punch, which would do a massive chunk of damage. So then see that Phil was barely awake or still up, as then Ash would say, Phil, I know how hard this battle is, but focus on doing the best that you can. As then Ash would give an encouraging look, which would cause Phil to realise that it should try its hardest, as it would then glow, wanting some more power, which would cause it to evolve, as it would grow in size, as it would grow some whiskers around its face, as it would evolve into Celio. Celio would learn Ice Beam from its evolution, as then would test out the new move and would freeze Slaking's right fist, as then Slaking would lie down a bit more with its Truant ability, which would not allow it to attack this turn, as then Celio would use an Ice Beam, which would do a lot of damage to Slaking. Then Slaking would get back up and would use a Body Slam, as then Celio would have avoided most of the attack, but some of it still would have hit Celio, as then Celio would use a Water Gun, which would do some decent damage, as then Slaking would finish it off with a Body Slam, which Celio couldn't avoid this time. As then Ash would send out his infamous Venusaur, the Pokemon that won him the Johto League and the Pokemon that beat a Rapidash to give Ash the first place. Norman would then say, oh, Venusaur, looks like your strongest is coming out now. It's like you're really having a challenge, aren't you, Ash? And Ash would say, yes I am. As then Ash would call for a full power Razor Leaf, which Slaking wouldn't be able to avoid with its lazy and fat build, which isn't very good for dodging attacks. As then Slaking would take the attack, as it would try go for a Focus Punch, but Ash would call for a Vine Whip, as the Vine Whips would catch Slaking's arm, as would then cause Slaking to as it would spin, and would cause Slaking to spin. I would let it go, launching it towards the wall and defeating it, similar to how Ash beat Gary in the Silver Conference. As then Noah would say, I saw that against your rival in the Silver Conference. Looks like you're still using some of those winning strategies, aren't you? As then Ash would say, yeah. As then Slaking would be defeated. As then Noah would walk up to Ash and would shake his hand and would say that he really does deserve his title as Silver Conference champion. I mean, not champion, but the winner of it. He's not a champion quite yet. As then Max wouldn't believe this, as then he'd want to go and steal the badge from Ash, but Ash would quickly put it in a badge case before Max would get to it, which would be a good thing for him, because I'm not very sure that Ash would want to go and explain to a child, I mean a younger child, look man, I deserve the badge, stop playing around, especially since since he's not as nice as in the original timeline, but he still is quite nice. As then Ash would leave, with May and Max deciding to follow him after that little display. So okay, I really enjoyed making this part, even though I wanted to upload earlier this week as I had a lot of time. With a lot of time, a lot of other stuff comes in. I also had some stuff going on, and I needed to get some stuff done, so I couldn't really upload as early as I like to. Anyway, this is no time to go on a tangent that I don't need to go on, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.